Well, first of all, thank you for coming this morning. I appreciate it. We've got 3.5 storms worth of snow on the ground and ice under that, and you all made it. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. We will be posting this series on the YouTube channel for Norfield Church, so if anybody you talk to wants to see it, it will be there, along with every week's sermon is posted on our Norfield channel. So you should know about that. You got copies of last week's handout. Last week I started by telling that little story about my brother, and it confused a lot of you. Why would I start with that story? So I'm not going to start with a story about this kid who hated me in grade school, but I'll tell it at some point. I want to start instead with some quiet time where we think, and I mean really think, based on today, yesterday, this past week, this past month, this past year, who has done for me what I needed done for me? Who has been neighbor to me, helped me? Who are those specific people? And I mean for us to spend a little time remembering the occasion when I was given support, encouragement, assistance, when I was saved by the intervention of another person, whoever that was. I remember that person, I remember the occasion. So if you don't mind, we're going to put on YouTube a few minutes of us just sitting and thinking about that. Who has helped me and where? I know there's more to think of than what we've got so far. In my case, there's gifting, a gift of coffee. When I didn't have any coffee, there was no way I was getting to the store. A gift of soup when I was feeling ill. A member of this church came to my house in the snowstorm with a plant that smelled of summer. Gifting is part of it. What other parts are there? What were you thinking of?
John and I started the Reservoir Run half marathon.
Got you in the papers.
And when we did that, we'd never done anything like that before. And we wondered how on earth we were going to pull it off. And one of the things that I realized that I had to do was to start a website for the runners so that they would know what was going on. Well, I had no clue how to do that. So I was talking to John Foxon, our police chief, and he said, well, Matt Brodacki is our IT person. I bet he would be happy with it. He came over early one morning at 7 o'clock in the morning and taught me how to get a website going.
And through that website, you were able to manage all the difficulties that came with possible postponement of the run and everything else that wasn't going along with that run.
I mean, it's not a professional looking thing, but it works. It works, it does what it has to do.
Great.
Well, I can even add to that, not the website, because I stay as clear from that as I possibly can. But one of the things that we needed was support from everybody to accomplish this. And Woody, for example, volunteered to help us recruit volunteers. And by the time he and we were all finished, we had almost 80 people volunteering in different various functions. And over the past 2 years, we've been able to give away over $60,000 to various charities.
Great. So double Woody for lining them up and the volunteers for doing the volunteering.
Absolutely.
Joan.
Well, I'm sitting here and all these names run through my mind. I can't constantly, I'll be here all day to try to express thanks and affirmation that people have helped me over the past 2 years, whatever. But the other day, and so when the heavy snow came down, I usually shovel up and stuff, and my tenant wasn't available, and there's a knock on the door, and I open the front door, and there are 3 teenagers from 3 different houses standing there with shovels over their shoulders. And they're looking at each other, and I said, well, just pick a place and shovel. Thank you.
That's awesome.
And then they shoveled, and they said, we'll be back. Don't you do that, Mrs. Anderson, we'll be back.
That's awesome.
And you don't find, well, you do. I found that children, we don't hear, things that make you upset us, but they are good at here and step right up when you need to.
Good.
I was thinking about several situations where actually strangers would stand in the gap and so that you wouldn't have frustration. And specifically, if you have health problems and you're trying to deal with doctor's offices that say, oh yeah, you're really sick, come in a month from Thursday, and so that kind of frustration of getting things scheduled and whatever, when you're not feeling well, is hard. And many times it's a stranger who's actually doing her job, but doing it in a way that she's actually there to help.
Right.
And serve. There's so many people who act like, if all these sick people would just go away, I could get my paperwork done, like that kind of thing. But these people, some people, and they come just when you need them. Say they call you back, or they say, oh yeah, we can do that tomorrow, but they love what they do. And I always think of that scripture that you do it as unto the Lord. And so that really encouraged me that when I work, I try to do that.
Try to be there for other people in that way.
And just as unto the Lord, do your best.
Very good.
So I think I would echo what Joan said, is that there are so many people along the way that do so many wonderful things for you. And I do believe God brings people into your sphere of your life at particular times. But the person that I was thinking as you asked us to reflect on this, the list of names that could go on and on. But the person, and this is going to, of course, embarrass them, the person that has saved me the most has to be Lorena. And having someone who is with you through it all is a reminder of God's love, and that's no small thing.
A worthy name.
Yeah. Building on what Debbie was saying, I found interesting. I'm in a job search, and our family's going through all sorts of stuff that I won't bore you with. But I found that there are helpers and non-helpers, and the helpers come from some of the most unexpected areas. Now, some of the helpers, in my case, are paid to help, so they're headhunters or doctors or things like that. But some of them, I don't even know that well. And they've come out and they've really gone out of their way to introduce me to people and companies and things like that. So
Right.
it comes from unexpected areas, and it comes in two ways. One is very practical things, and the other one is prayer. So those that can't help practically have helped in prayer. So
Well, I think, I want to get at that. Yesterday, my furnace went out. It only does that on weekends during storms. But it went out. And Jared was the guy from Sippin Fuel, came and repaired it and got my heat back on and my hot water running. And am I less grateful to Jared because it's his job to do that? No, I'm very grateful to him that he did that. So whether it's someone's job or not is not the issue. I think both of you have said that you can be very grateful to someone who does their job in a generous, open-hearted way. And that it becomes more important, are we serving our neighbor in that generosity, in that open-heartedness, or are we just doing our job and don't bother me with that? I'll go into a little different personal territory. This is not the story I referred to, but when I was in severe mental distress and seeing a psychiatrist more than once a week to get help, first of all, I was helped by him greatly, and by the pharmaceutical companies and everything else. That's all wonderful, and I appreciated all of that. But in the middle of that, out of the clear blue sky, I got a phone call from a former student who I had known while he was a student was severely mentally handicapped. He had depression issues, he had manic issues, he had schizophrenic issues, he had every different kind of issues. And he had no idea what I was going through. But he just called out of the blue, years after he had graduated, and inquired after me. And we had what ended up being the first extended conversation that I had had with another human being, other than my psychiatrist, in 3-4 months. And I don't talk on the phone. I hate talking on the phone. In fact, I had a couple of phone calls yesterday, and it was so funny to me because everybody I talked to seemed to be like, okay, thanks, bye. Like, ready to hang up. I don't want to talk on the phone anymore. And I was like, yeah, that's how I feel too. I don't like talking on the phone. But I had this huge conversation that was so immensely helpful. And the bridge was made to someone who I knew suffered. And it was because we had that shared element, that we were both suffering. We were both in difficulty, in distress, that he was able, unknown to him, to help me. So sometimes that help is coming from people who already love you, care about you, etc. Sometimes that's coming from people who it's just their job. They're doing it in a way that makes you feel comforted. And then sometimes it's coming from people who are fellow sufferers, people who are in the boat with you, known or unknown. Many of us don't know each other's struggles. I think about issues, for example, of loss in people's lives. We know some losses because they're very public. The loss of a spouse of many years, that's very public. But the loss of an expected child may not be public at all, and yet may be shared silently. And there are ways that we can reach one another through those veils. Are there more stories that come from this gratitude? Yes.
I may cry.
That's acceptable.
This is a very special moment because 6 years ago this week, I was told I was probably going to die. Right, where was that? And I remember that night, just, sort of finally took hold. And I would say probably everyone in this room has contributed to my feeling that I just laid back and there were 1,000 arms holding me up. And to this day, it's so palpable every time I drive in, I walk in, and I feel so fortunate because it wasn't only these people who have been part of my life for a very long time, but it was people at my office, people at my gym, people at the hospital. who kept such constant care over me. And still do. And that's an overwhelming feeling because I think people often go through their lives not realizing how many people around them support them.
Yeah, you reminded me there briefly of the opening of Dante. The Divine Comedy opens with, in the middle of my life. We're all in the middle of our life, all the time. In the middle of my passage through life, I found myself in a dark wood. And in a certain sense, everything that happens to us, we're still in the middle of that dark wood. And the idea that there are people that we are reached out to by, that we are supported by, that we are led through that passage by, is critical. And then there are moments in life where we have no contribution to make. We have no energy for our own consideration left anymore. Where we know. So there's that the little poem about the footprints in the sand, and the idea that there's some invisible person carrying us. But we know, who have experienced life, that there are visible people making those footprints in the sand underneath us.
To look at the other side of that, I had a conversation, and I also don't like to talk long on the phone, but I had a long conversation yesterday with my in-law or outlaw, whichever way you choose, who's about to go in this next Thursday for a knee replacement. And having gone through that, he had a whole series of questions that some of which were practical, but most of which were really
Set my fears at ease.
yes. What am I going to add? What should I expect, and how should I deal with it? And it's not often that you have an opportunity to consciously help somebody else. And I think that was something that happened to me yesterday, which I was very grateful that I was able to be some help to him, I think.
Well, that's the second silence on this morning's videotape.
Sorry about that.
No, that's a fantastic segue, because the second silence is exactly that. Who have you helped, and who have you been helpful to? Debbie, you have a thought.
I wanted to build on that because I think the helpers probably get more out of helping than the people they're helping. So sometimes, like when one of my kids calls and they're having a bad day, or pray for me, and I said, well, okay, we'll pray, but I also want you to pray that God will put someone in your path that needs something today that you can contribute, because it'll make you feel better. So
That you'll know who that person is when you see them.
you'll know, yeah, because somebody's hopefully praying the same thing in the morning. Put me in someone's path.
Let me help someone.
Somebody, and then you just feel like, I'm the father of the king. I mean, I'm the child of the king. You know, it's like, I have a job. I'm in the family business, you know.
So spend a minute with us thinking in the other direction. Who have you helped? Who have you been helpful to? Out of necessity, out of obligation, it's your job, out of love and care, or even against your own best judgment. Who have you been helpful to? Who have you been neighbor to? Let's really spend a minute thinking that way, with grateful hearts. connection to this process of thinking that way. And that is, there's a long list of people I wish I had done more for.
Exactly what I've done.
How many of you have had that thought for the last minute? Oh, but I meant to have done. But what have you done? What has been done to be neighborly, inside and outside neighborliness? This is harder to share when you're not comfortable.
How can I say this? Well, I believe in listening. I believe in trying to be mindful and aware. And I keep going back to be still and know that I'm in God.
Yes.
And for some reason or other, and I don't know if anyone else has the same feeling, but when you're quiet and aware and just sitting there, or standing there, whatever you're doing, and your mind is clear, there is someone who comes into it. And I believe in God, whatever form He is, God, Son, Holy Spirit, at the moment, is the one that leads you to who you're supposed to reach out to. That's my experience every single day in my life. However, if you want it specific, I have a friend here who I really love dearly, and she is in terrible trouble financially, with her son, daughter, and just in poverty, clinging to her life, and I'm thinking, what can I do? Well, she needs money. I can't do that. I can't do money anymore. But she has 9 cats. So I do cat food. And, when I go there, with this load of cat food, she cries. And it's a small thing, well, it's a big thing to her. But it's not the usual way where you go hold someone's hand, you take them to the hospital, or you whatever. Helping her care for what is precious to her, which is her cats. But I remember sitting thinking about it, saying to the Lord, this is very much. What I got back was, it's enough.
Yeah. So one of the stories in the handout today is the Good Samaritan, and it strikes me very strongly that the Good Samaritan, when he takes the man who's been robbed on the road, he takes him to the inn, and he says to the innkeeper, take care of him. Here's 2 denarii, and I'll pay you whatever bill comes up. In other words, he's not saying do exactly these things. His instruction to the innkeeper is take care of him. That open-endedness, what does that taking care of mean, is what's so wonderful there. And it really is exactly that. Someone can write her a check for $80,000 that wouldn't mean the same thing as a grocery bag full of cat food. Because the grocery bag full of cat food means to her, someone understands what my cats mean to me in my struggle with life. Now that's, we can balance that equation forever. But you have found a way of caring there that's really meaningful to her, and that makes it meaningful to you. Another story like that.
Phyllis and I went through something in October which was very difficult, and we both were support. My best friend for almost 40 years, he's on life at the beginning of October. He had been diagnosed with terminal COPD, and decided he didn't want to spend his life in a wheelchair and oxygen. So we have been support for his 2 daughters. Both of them are grown, but still they needed a lot of emotional support. And we went with Rob and Kristen, and the 4 of us met them down in New York. We did our own little memorial service, and something that we've been in touch with the girls since then. It's been very important.
It's facilitating their grief, but facilitating their also positive connection in the face of a negative circumstance. I mean, very difficult situation to be in. one of my joys of the past year in terms of being a neighbor was Helen Campbell passed away while I was in the South. And I resolved very early on that come the fall, I was going to gather together a group of people, mostly the Wednesday morning Bible study ladies, but a few others to be part of it, people who had rung bells next to Helen. And we had a tea, and we sat and we talked about Helen, and we had photographs of Helen and remembered Helen, and it was a gift to me because I had missed Helen's memorial service, but it was a gift to them to be able to gather again, not in that immediacy of grief that the memorial service constituted, but something else later on. So we can offer each other these gifts. Deb?
I've learned in the past year that sometimes just showing up and being, like you were saying, a presence and meeting whatever need is there. And Phil and I laugh about it because we're so different, but together we get the job. So, for instance, my mom is visiting my mother now in the nursing home. It isn't like an uplifting experience in terms of she's not really, oh, hi, Debbie, you know, she's didn't know who you are. But I don't want her to be alone. So I go and I just sit there with her, and she talks, and Phil cleans everything. You know, like when we leave, she's happy, and her room is just great. You know, so I didn't clean the room, and he can do it. You can sit still, but we each have your ministry. And what did you really do? You sat there for 2 hours and held someone's hand, and
And so often the case held someone's hand for 2 hours, and they won't remember it 2 hours later.
That's okay.
That's okay. That's okay. The giving is somewhere else other than that.
I think they know. I just don't think they
Remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had a very strange experience because my first cancer was in 1977. And over those years, I've had cancer 4 times now. And
It scares more often.
well, but I know that I can beat it, so I'm positive about it. But I get phone calls from people, and I have ever since then, say, would you talk to my friend who's going through this, and just tell them your experience and how you can go about trying to deal with this. So I've had numerous conversations with strangers over the telephone about how to proceed, how to handle it, how to keep a positive attitude. And I don't know, I think that's God's way of saying, take something that was negative in your life and make it positive.
In the handout for today, I tried to group some, it's all scripture readings except for the quote from Bill and Ted. And I was a little nervous about including Bill and Ted because I thought some of you would be too old to get Bill and Ted. You might be too young for that. But I really do hear in Be Excellent to Each Other the same message as love one another. And in Party On Dudes, the same message as rejoice in all circumstances, keep on keeping on, that St. Paul says over and over again. That Bill and Ted are fairly scriptural. Now, my nomination for the single most Christian, beautiful film that ever was made is Babette's Feast. That this Danish film, which is incredibly bleak, incredibly gray, incredibly cold and chilly in every sense, and is in Danish and or French with a Danish accent. So, subtitled. So it's awfully hard to invite people into this film if they're not of a mindset already to watch a gray film from Denmark in Danish. But in this film, this little community on the northern peninsula of Denmark, sticking out into the North Sea, are joined together by a really austere interpretation of Protestant Christianity. And they fight with each other, and they argue with each other, and they abuse each other, and they hate each other, but they all cling to this version of Christianity, and into the midst of it comes this bedraggled French exile, Babette. And They have no idea who she is, but they take her in as a cook, and they let her cook the lutefisk. But they first force her to make it exactly the way it should be made, which is you take the fish and you put it in the lye and you let it sit there for weeks on end. Anyway. And only at the end of the film do you find out that she is the greatest chef in Paris. And that she's living in exile among this community. She happens to win the French lottery about midway through the film. And it's a lot of money. And the sisters are all upset because they know she's going to go back to France now. She's got all this money and she's going to go be independent. And she says, all right, sisters, let me throw you a dinner party. She doesn't lead them on, but she lets them think she's leaving. Let me throw you a dinner party. And she starts to order all these things. And it starts coming in by the boatloads and the truckloads and it's all this stuff. And then they have this huge feast. And during the feast, because of the feast, old wounds are mended, and hearts are mended, and bodies are made whole, and everyone is very happy by the end of it, thanks to the champagne and the wine and the pork and the beautiful turtle soup. They get to the end of the night, and they say, well, now you'll leave us, Babette. And she says, well, where would I go? And they say, well, all the money you won. And she said, there's no money left. She spent every dime she made in the lottery on that one dinner party. And they say, but 10,000 francs, how can it be possible? And she says, that's how much dinner for 12 costs at the cafe in Paris. And hearts are changed by this generosity. It's a fantastic movie that I've now spoiled for you if you haven't seen it. But it's okay because it's a slog. But it's worth it. So one of the points of our message is don't treat others badly, and I have a few scripture passages about that. That seems obvious, and yet, if I list something on eBay and I tell a little fudge here and a little fudge there that'll make me more money, that's treating others badly. In a certain way, St. John the Baptist says so right there. Okay. The second part of it is be good to those who need it most. In other words, don't be good to those it's easy to be good to, but be good to those in need. All right, I have some good passages about that. The third part is be good to those you think don't deserve it. And it's starting to get hard. And the fourth part of the message is be good to those who definitely, by any definition, do not deserve it. And this is a tricky one. This gets to be very much what Jesus was saying against the Old Testament. So in the Old Testament, it has the Hammurabic Code called Lex Talionis, which is the law of even retaliation. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Now, this is not widely understood, but that law was actually a very just law for its time. Because before that, if somebody took your eye out, you took their whole village out. And what the law was saying, no, just an eye for an eye. The law was saying just a tooth for a tooth. So it was actually trying to hold back from a previous, more primitive idea of justice, which is somebody knocked one tooth out, you leave them headless. No, they said one tooth knocked out, you knock only one tooth out. So that's only an eye for only an eye. Only a tooth for only a tooth is a way of reading the Code of Hammurabi. And Jesus says, somebody knocks one tooth out, give them another tooth. Somebody strikes you on one cheek, present the other cheek to be struck. And Jesus lived this out. The Passions show that Jesus lived this out. Does that mean it's easy for us to do? Read that. Okay. Turning the page, we get to the final part of that, which is how much giving and sharing is enough. And you read some of these passages from Luke, Acts, and John that are saying how the early church interpreted this, and we start to get into a very difficult question of, do I really have to sell everything I own and also be poor in order to be Christian? So this is going to make, I hope, some good reading during the week, some things to think about in how we be excellent to each other. So I said I would have a story from grade school, and here it is. And this story is over 40 years old, well over 40 years old. And I remember the boy's name. I remember the name of every enemy I had in kindergarten, grade school, high school. I don't remember the name of the kids I hung out with and played with. I remember the names of the kids who bullied me, picked on me, made life miserable for me. And this one kid was the enemy number one. I will not say his name because he's probably still alive. Maybe he'll check this on YouTube. Look me up. The whole class was acting up, and I was being myself, which is I was sitting there going, why do they have to always defy the teachers? Why do they have to act up all the time? Why can't we just learn in school? I was that kind of kid, and I really meant it. I just didn't understand why the kids had to act up and aggravate the teacher all day long when we could have been learning. And the teacher finally had it, and she said, that's it, boys and girls. You all have detention. When school is out, the bell will ring, and you will stay here, and you will stay here, and you will stay here all afternoon. Dinner time will come and go, and you will still be here in my classroom. And every kid in the classroom, and the bell rang, and we all looked at the teacher like, how serious had she been? And she was serious. And we sat there, and 10 minutes went by, 20 minutes went by, 30 minutes went by. And my arch enemy number one raised his hand, and I thought, oh, don't raise your hand, don't raise your hand. And he said, sister, it's not right for you to hold David Connell along with the rest of us.
Wow.
Because he never does anything wrong. And I'm just sitting there going, oh no. And sister thought about it for a few seconds and said, you're right. David Connell, you may go. And dismissed me from this endless detention. Now, she let the rest of the class go about 10 minutes later. At this point, I have no way of understanding why did that kid do that? Was he just trying again to mock me in front of the whole class as here's the goody two-shoes? Was he trying to get me out? All I know was I got out of that endless detention 10 minutes ahead of the rest of the class. And so my good behavior in class was rewarded. And the fact that that kid was the agent of it, whatever, I'm grateful. We can do good for people we don't like, and people we don't like can do good for us. Jesus' message comes back over and over again. Love one another, and stop putting a boundary where the otherness is, and stop putting a boundary what the limits of your loving can be. Stop thinking negatively about these commandments. And St. Paul picks up on it in the same way. Let me see if I can find that little Romans D8. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. That your focus should not be on what is just and what is right and what is earned and what is deserved, what I deserve, what he deserves, what they deserve. Your focus should be on what good can I do in this world while I am here. What good can I do in this world? And that's where the second part of this great commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, comes in. What good can I do for the world around me? And that's an important place to think on. And that's all the time we have today. Thank you for coming early today. I appreciate it. More copies of the handout if anybody should want to take one or innovation.